This episode of Distraction is sponsored by Omega Bright CBD. Formulated by Omega Bright Wellness, creators of the #1 omega-3 supplements for the past 20 years. Omega Bright CBD, safe, third-party tested, and it works. Shop online at omegabrightwellness.com.
If anybody here is listening to Ned's podcast and lives with schizophrenia, or loves someone with schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, severe post-traumatic distress, has had a suicide attempt, NAMI is a great group. It is a great group. And people, the one thing you'll know is the people will listen to you. They won't dismiss you. They know how hard this is. They know how much pain there is in this, and they will embrace you.
Hello and welcome to Distraction. I'm your host, Dr. Ned Hallowell. I am really excited about our show today. As you know, I have some very special people in my life. And one of those is Dr. Ken Duckworth. I've known him since he was a resident back at Mass Mental Health Center. And I used to call him one of the living saints of this world. He's an amazing man. He's a Harvard professor, a psychiatrist, and the chief medical officer for NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness. And Ken and I share a personal history in that both of us had bipolar fathers, and that's what brought us into the field. And we exchange stories about that often. Ken is also double board certified in adult and child psychiatry, and has completed a forensic psychiatry fellowship. There's nothing he doesn't know about. He's also an incredibly devoted dad to his 3 wonderful, brilliant daughters, and has made them his top priority throughout his life. Another thing we share with me with my 3 kids and him with his 3 kids. And so we, over the years, have sort of grown up together, and even though I'm a little bit older than he is, he is one of the most special people I know. So without further ado, let me welcome my friend. I
got to meet this guy, if any of that's true.
Well, it's you, nice. Ken. Just look in the mirror.
All right, so I want to start with a story, if I may.
Please.
This is about Ned, and in 1986, I took the radical path, which was extremely unfashionable, to write about my dad's bipolar disorder as the reason I wanted to become a psychiatrist. This essay was very personal and intense and real. My father was a very good man with a very bad illness. And I spent a lot of time at state hospitals, police coming to the house, and then on alternate summers or falls or winters, my friends and relatives saying, "How come you got the nice dad?" So I'm like, yes, I did get the nice dad, but there was an asterisk there, which is that his bipolar disorder was quite severe. And it made a big mark on me. So this is 1986. This is NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, had just gotten started. And I thought, I'm just going to write the truth because, for gosh sake, I'm going into psychiatry. Surely someone will understand what this is like to have been through a personal experience. Little did I know how naive that was. And I went to 15 of the best programs in America, and 14 of those people ignored my essay, literally talking to me about my major in political science or my passion for college football, which is ongoing. I went to the University of Michigan, and no, I don't want to talk about Ohio State. So one person that I interviewed with the day before I saw Ned in Boston at a world-famous Harvard institution said to me, he's the only person besides Ned who I met the next day who took a look at my essay, and he says, "So, you want to help your father. That's a terrible reason to become a psychiatrist." And I say that with an accent because he had an accent. He apparently was a very famous person because I was a 26-year-old scared kid out of medical school. I didn't know what that whole thing was, that he was a world-famous psychoanalyst. And I said, well, I have been traumatized by this experience, but I loved him very much. And I thought it might be good if I could see if I could make a difference, because I know a little bit about what it's like to love someone with a severe illness and see them for their strengths. And he further ridiculed me. And before I left and I walked out to my car, burst into tears, and didn't even finish the interview at that world famous program, I asked him one last question. And again, I sound like I have confidence, but I don't. At the time, I'm a kid. I know no one. I said, what would be a good reason to become a psychiatrist? He paused for a minute. I think nobody had ever asked him that hard of a question. He paused for a really long time, and he said, well, if your father is a psychiatrist, that would be a good reason. And I said, don't we have something of a workforce shortage in the field? Like I did say, I got in one punch, right? But then I left, and I even skipped the free lunch, which is very unlike me if you knew me at all. I walked to my car, burst into tears, and the next day I met Ned Hallowell. Now, I'm going to finish the story about this world-famous hospital. Flash forward 14 years, and I'm the commissioner of mental health, and this hospital does something very bad to a patient. And when I called them into my office, I wanted to remind them that I had the power to shut their facility because I was over licensing and control. What I did is I didn't do that, of course. It made me wonder what kind of person I was, because I did have the power to actually harm them back. But I said, I'd like to tell you a story. And I told them this story about how they had treated me when I was a nobody. And now I was the commissioner of mental health with power over their facility. I don't know if they listened to my story, but it was very therapeutic to tell it. So that next day, I got up and I thought, maybe psychiatry isn't for me. I liked cardiology, and I noticed they drove nicer cars than the psychiatrist. So I thought maybe I could just switch my whole orientation and just go into cardiology. I liked talking to people about their hearts. It seemed very concrete. And I really thought that morning that it wasn't for me. So after 14 programs had ignored me, one program had humiliated me. The last interview I did was with Ned Hallowell at the Massachusetts Mental Health Center. The other three people I interviewed with at Mass Mental Health Center were very nice, but they also ignored my essay. It was just too much to take on. I mean, you want to deal with this guy's problems and his issues, and how does that fit into who he is? Ned read my essay, and I'm going to say 45 or 50 people I interviewed across America, was the only person who read the essay, looked at me and said, what a great thing. You know what this is like. Do you know what a difference you can make in people's lives? When Ned said that to me, I made a decision to move to Boston from Philadelphia, and I'm still affiliated with the same Massachusetts Mental Health Center 3 decades later. Yep. It matters how you talk to people, and it matters how you talk to them about their vulnerabilities. Ned was encouraging and supportive. He also encouraged me to pursue my actual interest, which was the first person and family experience of living with a condition and trying to master it. And then, of course, I found the National Alliance on Mental Illness, or they found me, and I've been their national medical director and now chief medical officer for 15 years. I found this community of people who live the first experience and the family experience, and Ned's encouragement, pursue what you want to do. You might actually have, some knowledge or advantage through your traumatic experiences that will help you be a better doctor. So that's a long story about Ned, but it's the crucial story of my becoming a psychiatrist, because for that one day, after I was humiliated at the world-famous Harvard institution down the street, I thought seriously about becoming a cardiologist.
Well, I'm glad you didn't do that, Ken.
I do drive a Mazda. I should be noted. I could be driving a Beamer, but psychiatry is my calling. I just needed one person to respond to my essay with an affirmation, or at least an inquiry of why was that important. So, Ned, you made a big difference in my career, and I shall never forget that.
Well, thank you so much. And you in turn have made a huge difference in the lives of thousands, if not millions, of people around the country, and with various kinds of mental illness. Do you want to just talk a little bit about what are some of the misconceptions in the general public that you could disabuse people of?
Well, let's start with the idea that these aren't real illnesses. So back in the day, before this thing called mental health parity, I testified before Congress and multiple state houses that my dad had bipolar disorder, which easily could have killed him if he didn't receive medical care. And his medical care was the bare minimum. And I had the misfortune of having cancer as a psychiatric resident. And I could have been dead, of course, through an illness that would have killed me if I not attended to it. And I said, and somehow in our society, this is in the 1990s, cancer is considered legitimate. People bring you casseroles. They call you a hero. They offer to cover for you. They send you flowers. And my father, after his manic episodes, was isolated, alone. People wouldn't talk to us at church. Churches supposedly be theoretically nice people. They would all kind of move away from us after a manic episode. And I thought this was a big part of my life in my 40s, which was to fight for this idea of mental health parity. These conditions are real conditions. Is it true that there's things we don't know about the brain? That's absolutely true. Is it true that I can't tell you how lithium works to save people's lives? It's true. It might have something to do with membrane stabilization. But is it true that we don't really know how the antipsychotics impact voices? The answer is it's really humbling because there's a lot we don't know. But the fact that we don't know a lot about the brain has nothing to do with the fact that these are real conditions. And if you need any further proof, I mean, look at the evidence on suicide, which has gone up steadily over the last 2 decades. From 1999 to 2018, we've had essentially a straight line of increase in suicide. At the same time, we've had an increase in overdose deaths due to opiates. And these two illnesses together, conditions or outcomes together, have for the first time in 100 years caused a reduction in the American life expectancy. Really? You know, the deaths by suicide and the deaths by overdose. Wow. The French continue to smoke their brains out, drink coffee up the, to the max, and their lifespan keeps expanding. Yeah. This is an American problem. Yeah. And it has something to do with health disparities. It has something to do, with the complexity of the uninsured, but it has a lot to do with the fact that mental illnesses are not fully treated. And because of our problem with opiates, we've seen a lot of premature death.
When you say mental health parity, Ken, what does that mean, mental health parity?
Mental health parity means your insurance company can't give you unlimited visits to see your oncologist, which, of course, as a cancer patient, when I was a young man, I was allowed to do anything I wanted to. I think my treatment probably cost $500,000. I think my final copay was $50, right? Like cancer was legitimate. My illness was legitimate. Yeah. Was I grateful? I'm incredibly grateful. Yeah. Medical science saved my life, but the insurance company at the same time would have $500 as your outpatient psychotherapy maximum. So that meant I could go see an oncologist twice a week if I wanted to, but I could only see a mental health practitioner perhaps 5 times if they charged $100 an hour. And if they had the courage to charge $250 an hour, I only had 2 sessions that were covered. So this is the inequity that was structured in to the mental health system and into health insurance. So mental health parity was a big cause celeb of mine personally, and largely National Alliance on Mental Illness made this happen. The first version was 1998, Domenici and Wellstone. Domenici was a senator from New Mexico, Wellstone, a Democrat from Minnesota, and they together had family members with serious mental illness. They got it. And they did version kind of 1.0. And then later on, Patrick Kennedy with the Affordable Care Act and all the activity after the housing collapse, 2008. This amendment was tied to it. And to make a long story short, mental health access has improved, but I think a lot of people still feel that we're not at true parity yet. That means treating them exactly the same. But I do think we're going in the right direction.
And what percentage of families in the country have at least one member who does have a serious mental illness?
So the answer, Ned, is 1 in 5 Americans would endorse, 1 in 5 families have a person who would endorse an anxiety disorder, a depressive disorder, another mood disorder like bipolar disorder, psychotic disorder, or post-traumatic stress disorder, or OCD. These are kind of the major categories. For serious mental illness, the number is smaller. That's about 1 in 17 people has a condition that is severely impacting their functioning. that is brain-based that involves emotion, behavior, cognition, that is severely impacting their functioning, frequently with work, relationships, and their health and self-care.
Yeah. What percentage of people who could benefit from help from a mental health professional actually consult a mental health professional?
That's a good question. We think less than half of people with most mental health conditions actually get help.
Wow.
Now, the good news is since we've done this whole mental health parity thing, the number of people who are seeking help is increasing. And we saw this in the pandemic. NAMI has a helpline, 1-800-950-NAMI, which is staffed by individuals, with first-person experience or family experience. Mm-hmm. Our calls went up very substantially.
Wow.
And the other thing which was surprising in the pandemic is the American mental health field, not known for sprinting, pivoted in 3 days to become a teleservice. And the experience of the therapists and the patients has been very positive, although not universally positive. But I think it's a new way of delivering care that's here to stay. Mm-hmm. The therapists were surprised that the people always show up, that the cancellation rate is low, that they don't have that first 5 minutes of a session where they can read CNN online, because the patients show up on time, as they do for their professional meetings or other Zoom calls during the course of the day. And the patients notice that it's convenient, they get heard, and they don't have to pay for parking or fight traffic. And so I think that for people who don't have a lot of privacy, it's important, to have a phone service covered so people can go into their car. If you live in a studio apartment with another person, and part of your experience is to talk about that person, privacy can be a challenge. I do think there are people who are a little paranoid of technology. There are people for whom this isn't an ideal setup. But I think if you talk to people, they'd rather see somebody like you, Ned, in person. But given the fact that we're in the middle of our first pandemic in our lifetime, right, the rules have changed. And I think the mental health field has responded.
And they've changed by using Zoom or some other platform.
Any platform that they've been using has made a difference. And it's interesting. The other fields of medicine have really struggled.
Yeah.
How do I do ophthalmology care?
Right.
How do I take care of people's knee problems? Well, those things are very hard to do virtually, but because our skill set is listening, judgment, empathy, compassion, and thoughtful reflection and potentially recommendations, that's a skill set that's ongoing, right? We can't touch the patients. We're not supposed to take their blood pressure, right? We have to be thoughtful about what we're trying to do here in the field of medicine. And it turns out mental health is an incredibly easy thing to apply to the telespace. And I think that's been a great gift.
Do you think that will continue after the pandemic is over?
I do think people will want to see their therapists in person, right? I think they'll want to. But now that they've been thrown into the deep end of the teletherapy pool and realize they can swim pretty well, I think a lot of people are going to say, it's an hour to drive to Sudbury. Right. You probably don't charge people for parking, Ned, at your office. But Sudbury's not, next to my house. So if I were to come see you as a professional, it'd be an hour commitment going out, an hour commitment coming back. I'd have to pick up some apples in Concord on the way, right? So it's 4 hours round trip. So, it's a big commitment. And if I could see you by pushing a button and then go back to work or engage in childcare or do any other tasks that might be relevant, like cooking dinner for the family. Yeah. I think I might choose to do that some of the time. And some of the time I just break down and make the trip.
Well, I've been taking a new supplement called Omega Bright CBD. And listeners know that Bright is spelled B-R-I-T-E. So it's Omega, B-R-I-T-E, CBD. As I've mentioned before, Omega Bright CBD was created by my good friend, Dr. Carol Locke, graduate of Harvard Medical School, and her company, Omega Bright Wellness. They've been making the #1 omega-3 supplements for the past 20 years. Well, Carol and her team decided to break new ground, having set the standard for purity, safety, and efficacy in the world of omega-3s, And they've brought that same commitment to excellence to their new CBD supplement. I take it myself. It helps me with my reactivity, my impatience. It kind of just puts a smoother edge. It's in no way is it a buzz or a high, anything like that. It's way more subtle. But it's a very noticeable, subtle effect, and one that I've come to really appreciate as I take it every day. So, all right, get Omega Bright CBD online at omegabrightwellness.com. And now, Distraction listeners can save 20% on their first order by using the promo code PODCAST2020. That's PODCAST2020. Go to omegabrightwellness.com and order Omega Bright CBD. You'll be glad you did, just as I am. What about the person who's listening now and is saying, this living at home and this keeping social distance is starting to drive me crazy? That's not an illness, but what should that person do?
Well, first of all, I don't think anybody likes it, although I have one friend who's a psychiatrist who's a severe introvert who seems happier. Yeah. He works out of his basement, has lunch with his wife every day. I go over to his backyard every other week. We stand 20 feet away from each other and chat. I think his quality of life is improved. Now, this speaks to how individual this all is. Right. I, of course, am an extrovert.
Yes,
I struggle to not see my friends.
Yes.
I don't like not going down to my coffee shop at the end of my street and hanging out and talking to the owners. The owners are hiding in their masks. It's not a convivial environment. In fact, all the tables have been removed. So you can have a standing chat for 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Somebody checks in about my daughter who used to work there. But, there's something lost there. So I guess what I would say is isolation is hard on all of us.
Yes.
And if you have an anxiety disorder or depressive disorder, it's a challenge. You have to figure out, how do you stay connected with people? Mm-hmm. Connection is crucial for mental well-being. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't solve all problems, but, through your faith group, through AA, through a NAMI connection, through some other vehicle. I have a Monday night meeting with 4 friends. We used to go out to dinner once a month, and now we meet once a week. It's fun. Wonderful. I actually look forward to it because I have friend deficit disorder during the variation on the thing you studied. It's hard to be isolated. It is wearing. I will say that. I do think it's going to be a very long haul. I don't think the vaccine's going to turn up and everything's going to be okay. I think we're in for a protracted experience. So figuring out what your inventory of coping skills is. So mine happens to be connecting with friends online, family reunions of sorts online. We're doing a memorial service for a beloved member of the family this week in New Jersey. I didn't really want to do it, but somebody really wanted to get us together. So
good for you.
I'm driving to New Jersey, and I'm going to see the family, and it's not the way I wanted to see them. I wanted to have a party and hang out and toast the family member. But what we're going to do is have lunch under this tree where our little grave sites are in Cape May, New Jersey, and we're going to have lunch, elbow bump, and go back to our respective corners. Extremely suboptimal. But I've come around from opposing this idea to believing it's probably better to make it the choice to be connected. You mentioned that your family's in North Carolina.
Yes.
Seeing their cousins, right? Yes. There's some risk there, but there's a lot of benefit in the connection.
Yes, there sure is. I mean, it's essential. I mean, we've learned, social isolation is as dangerous as cigarette smoking.
Yeah, it's really not a good thing. And so I really think we missed the boat when we called it social distancing. We should have called it physical distancing from the get-go. And I think you've seen in this entire pandemic that we've missed several big boats, right? telling people not to wear masks because we were trying to secure them for medical providers, I think has confused a lot of people, giving the impression that young people can't really get the virus, so they can feel free to party on at the beach. Again, just some young people, duly noted. I think we haven't done a very good job. And by calling it social distancing, I think we missed it. The idea is we have to stay away from each other because the virus is transmitted physically. But socially, you've got to stay connected to your people.
Absolutely.
You really have to, because that's an antidepressant and an anti-anxiety treatment.
I call it the other vitamin C, Vitamin Connect.
There we go, Vitamin Connect. It's also good for people who have addiction vulnerabilities.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
Because connection is really important. I have a friend who's a physician who's in AA, and on his birthday, I checked in on him his birthday, and he said, I had a great birthday. I said, what made it great? He said, well, I'm here in my apartment, and I have been to 2 AA meetings, and I got a lot of love in both of them. And it was noon. I called him in the middle of the day, and I thought, this man has figured something out. He said, I'd be at meetings anyway, and it turns out the AA platform is very well suited. And it might even be better because when on a Zoom call, if somebody's speaking, you get to see their face.
Right.
And you're not spacing out in the room like you might be the rest of the time. So he found something that meant something to him. And this is the art of self-care, right? You have to find out, what is it that will help you get through this? Because this might be a long haul. And it's not good for people to lose their jobs. It's not good for people to live with the anxiety of losing their jobs. And coping with the anxiety of someone you love getting ill or dying is a lot to cope with.
So we're almost out of time. Just coming back to irrational things and what to do to combat them. What can we do to dismantle the terrible stigma that still surrounds mental health issues?
So I prefer the words prejudice, discrimination to the word stigma, because the word stigma itself is a complication of how you think about things. So, what is the prejudice that you have for yourself?
Right.
If you were to say, can I join this club? And every time a famous person comes out and says, I have such and such a condition.
Right.
Selena Gomez 2 weeks ago did a talk with NAMI's CEO. I've had several chat with famous celebrities on NAMI's Instagram page. People want to talk about their mental health conditions. And so this idea, I have prejudice against somebody, gets broken down when you see Selena Gomez, one of the most amazing humans on the planet, has said, I think it's okay to talk about the fact that I struggle with bipolar disorder. That's very helpful. And so the related thing about the attitudes is the discrimination. This gets back to our early discussion about mental health parity.
Right.
And the idea that you just structure in rules that jam people, who don't have illnesses that are considered, quote, legitimate, end quote. Right. And so this is why mental health parity is an ongoing struggle. We continue to have lawsuits and interpretations, and attorney generals review it. What are the conditions under which the race is actually fair for a person with a mental health condition? So can you allow yourself to seek help? Still a challenge for many men. There was a pretty good study a little while ago that showed that the more kind of hyper toxic masculinity men endorsed, the more likely they were to have very bad outcomes, including suicide. And the idea somehow being threatened by mental health is such an unfortunate piece of our culture. And I think these are ordinary human experiences. My dad's bipolar disorder, hearing voices and, believing that he was Jesus wasn't great.
Right.
But it is 2.7% of the population, plus or minus, has this condition. It's rooted in biology. It's, treatable for the most part. It requires a lot of self-knowledge and self-care. Was it difficult? It was very difficult. Was it worse before there were things like NAMI and Selena Gomez, to use two examples? The answer was yes, it was worse.
Yeah.
There's a NAMI chapter in every major American city that's doing connection groups and programming, educational work, advocacy. If you feel the service system is mistreating you or somebody you love, well, let's fight to make it better. Mental health parity, that fight is not over. We've won some battles, but that war is not over. So I feel like there's a place to go now
Mm-hmm.
if you're struggling with this, and you will be welcomed by people who are loving and creative, a community of people who probably didn't start their lives thinking, I want to be identified with a condition that it does not have a high status, like mental health problems, mental health conditions. Turns out it's an amazing group of people, and I consider it my second family.
Yeah.
NAMI is in my will. I feel like NAMI helped to save my life by giving me a sense of purpose around these wounds I had.
Yeah.
And I feel so fortunate to have stumbled upon it. And if anybody here is listening to Ned's podcast and lives with schizophrenia, or loves someone with schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, severe post-traumatic distress, has had a suicide attempt, NAMI is a great group. It is a great group. And people, the one thing you'll know is that people will listen to you. They won't dismiss you. They know how hard this is. They know how much pain there is in this, and they will embrace you. So I think the question about prejudice, discrimination is, can you take the first step, right? Mm-hmm. And it might be talking to your primary care doctor about the fact that you can't sleep, you've lost 30 pounds, you've lost interest in everything, you're thinking about giving away your possessions. That's a classic depression. You could reach out to your primary care doctor. They prescribe most of the antidepressants in America. They help people. They might be able to refer you to somebody who does therapy. Or if you don't want to go that route, you could start with NAMI and find a local NAMI chapter and say, what are the resources that are out there? How can I find a path to be supported and connected while living with this particular challenge that I have?
Mm-hmm. You go to NAMI.org. Is that the website?
NAMI.org is where it's at. We get millions of hits, and we've become the dominant source of information for people in the last year. It's been interesting to me to see that, because I have tremendous respect for the other communities, NIMH, the American Psychiatric Association,
right.
But more people seem to be seeking media inputs and lessons from our website. So people have come to trust NAMI, and I'm grateful for that.
Well, that has a lot to do with you, Ken. I mean, because you're the face of it and the spokesman for it, and there's no one I know who's more, convincing, believable. You've done such a great job.
Well, thank you, Ned. And if it wasn't for you, I'd be practicing cardiology today and driving a BMW.
I think also the image problem would be helped if more people talked about, it's hard to find a very creative person who doesn't have either an anxiety disorder, depressive disorder, addiction, or ADHD. It's common among those conditions are common among the highly creative people amongst us.
Yeah, if you want to do a treatise on this, Kay Jamieson's Touched by Fire is, the artistic temperament and mood disorders.
Yeah,
it's unbelievable.
Yeah, absolutely.
How many of the artists that we would hold out as our greatest artists were clearly, quote, touched by fire. Maybe not with formal diagnostic schemes, but she goes through their
crazy as hell.
diaries, their writings, their observations. And you're absolutely right, Ned.
Right.
For many people.
Yeah. So it's not to be ashamed at all. By the time I die, I want people to wish they had ADHD, because if you manage it right, it's such an asset. It can ruin your life as well. But if listening to Ken, if you're listening and you know someone, don't think of it as a marker of shame. Think of it as a marker of talent. I tell people all the time. Or
of resilience.
Yeah.
We all have to cope with something.
Yeah.
And the fates conspired through genetics and environment and epigenetics to have you have a recurrent condition.
Right.
You're not alone with that. In fact, there are millions of people who are living with these kind of things, and together you can get a lot out of it. I do want to say one thing that I still quote you about whenever I'm confronted with somebody who says, I have a young child and he was just told he had ADHD. And I said, Ned Hallowell would say, you who have a BMW brain and a Chevy hand. And they said, how did you know he can't write? And I'm like, well, it's the Chevy hand is right there. All that great ideas he's having trouble translating it. Right, so, a few things that you've said, Ned, have really stuck with me, including when you said to one of my daughters who was diagnosed with ADHD, you said, so you have the gift.
Yes, exactly.
It was a great moment. It was a great moment in her life because thinking about these things, which have the potential to identify you as different or less than through a different lens.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That there's a possibility. There's a potentiality inside of us.
Yeah. No, I don't treat disabilities. I help people unwrap their gifts. And, I think
that's right.
You do the same thing. It's you're doing such spectacular work. I mean, it really is, it's a wonderful thing. I'm glad that NAMI is now the leading source of information. As I say, that's thanks to Dr. Ken Duckworth.
Well, it's a whole team of people, but I do think
people
trust a consumer family experience.
Yeah.
And we also made a decision about 3 years ago. Every research study we cite is listed on the website. Mm-hmm. You don't believe what we say, click on click on the research study, and you can see that it's only 400 people, but it's the best study there is on this topic. Mm-hmm. So we make everything as transparent as possible. Yeah. Goes back to the anti-science discussion we've had. I believe in science. I believe in education. And I believe that people have the capacity to learn and make decisions for themselves.
Yes.
So, if you want to see what the literature is on a specific treatment or intervention or on the risks or traumas that attend to certain things, it's on the NAMI website and it's all transparent.
Yep. NAMI.org. NAMI.org. Not .com, .org. NAMI.org. Well, Ken, I could talk to you for so long. This is wonderful. You really, you've brought so much and you do so much. And if people listening want to learn more and want to connect, feel a part of a growing community of people who have different brains, and learn how to understand them better.
That's
join
right.
a group.
The other thing you might want to check out, in addition to our groups, is I run a session called Ask the Expert once a month, where I get the leading thinkers in American mental health to talk about different topics, and people who join in. We run about 1,000 people per session.
Wonderful.
Can ask questions, and we cover everything from transcranial magnetic stimulation to minority disparities in mental health.
Wow. What's the latest on transcranial magnetic stimulation?
Well, I think it's pretty well covered by private insurance.
Yes, but does it work?
It does have an acute indication. So if you've failed on several meds, because nobody would start, with an engine problem by, doing a major overhaul of your engine. Right. They would probably add oil first, right? Check the timing of the engine. TMS does appear more invasive. But I took a 3-day course at the Beth Israel Hospital on transcranial magnetic stimulation. And I was impressed mostly by not the fact that when they zapped my brain, it felt like a bee sting to the skull. I'm like, how did they do a generic sham zap? Like, how would you know the difference between that zap? And I was very interested in that. But I talked to the techs. Instead of listening to only the professionals. And I interviewed about 5 of the techs. And I said to them, what do people say? And they say, our show rate is 95%. And I thought, okay, that's telling me something. People feel they're getting a benefit. So my understanding of the literature, Ned, is the maintenance use of TMS has not really been well established. I don't think there's really a research base for that. And I don't think it's well established for bipolar disorder or psychosis. But that would just be an example of a discussion that if you have depression and the other interventions haven't worked, there is some evidence there that this could be helpful to you. And the side effects are apparently quite mild in terms of a headache or something like that. But people show up at very high levels. And it makes a difference for people.
Well, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. You are a living saint, and can't thank you enough for taking time out of your amazingly busy schedule to join us. Listeners, go to NAMI.org, NAMI.org. or go to Ken's Ask the Expert, happens once a month, and join a chapter, get involved. Suddenly you will feel so much less alone and so much more accepted, and you'll learn, you'll gain knowledge, which is power in and of itself. Thank you all for joining us so much. Thank you especially, Ken. As I say, learn more, go to NAMI.org. And don't forget, please reach out to us with your questions, comments, and show ideas. We need them, we live off of them, we use them, and we produce them. Send an email or a voicemail to connect@distractionpodcast.com. That's connect@distractionpodcast.com. Distraction is created by Sounds Great Media. Our recording engineer and editor is the estimable Scott Persson, and our producer is the always vivacious and brilliant Sarah Guertin. I'm your host, Dr. Ned Hallowell, saying goodbye for now. The episode you just heard was sponsored by Omega Bright CBD, formulated by Omega Bright Wellness, creators of the #1 omega-3 supplements for the past 20 years. Omega Bright CBD, safe, third-party tested, and it works. Shop online at omegabrightwellness.com.